Chapter 2 of Babbitt. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. Babbitt by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 2. Relieved of Babbitt's bumbling and the soft grunts with which his wife expressed the sympathy she was too experienced to feel and much too experienced not to show, their bedroom settled instantly into impersonality. It gave on the sleeping porch. It served both of them as dressing-room, and on the coldest nights Babbitt luxuriously gave up the duty of being manly, and retreated to the bed inside to curl his toes in the warmth and laugh at the January gale. The room displayed a modest and pleasant color scheme, after one of the best standard designs of the decorator who did the interiors for most of the speculative builders' houses in Zenith. The walls were gray, the woodwork white, the rug a serene blue, and very much like mahogany was the furniture. The bureau with its great clear mirror, Mrs. Babbitt's dressing-table with toilet articles of almost solid silver, the plain twin beds, between them a table holding a standard electric bedside lamp, a glass for water, and a standard bedside book with colored illustrations. What particular book it was cannot be ascertained, since no one had ever opened it. The mattresses were firm but not hard, triumphant modern mattresses, which had cost a great deal of money. The hot water radiator was of exactly the proper scientific surface for the cubic contents of the room. The windows were large and easily opened, with the best catches and cords, and Holland roller shades, guaranteed not to crack. It was a masterpiece among bedrooms, right out of cheerful modern houses for medium incomes. Only it had nothing to do with the Babbitts, nor with anyone else. If people had ever lived and loved there, read thrillers at midnight, and lain in beautiful indolence on a Sunday morning, there were no signs of it. It had the air of being a very good room in a very good hotel. One expected the chambermaid to come in and make it ready for people who would stay but one night, go without looking back, and never think of it again. Every second house in Floral Heights had a bedroom precisely like this. The Babbitt's house was 5 years old. It was all as competent and glossy as this bedroom. It had the best of taste, the best of inexpensive rugs, a simple and laudable architecture, and the latest conveniences. Throughout, electricity took the place of candles and slatternly hearth fires. Along the bedroom baseboard were 3 plugs for electric lamps, concealed by little brass doors. In the halls were plugs for the vacuum cleaner, and in the living room plugs for the piano lamp, for the electric fan. The trim dining room, with its admirable oak buffet, its leaded glass cupboard, its creamy plaster walls, its modest scene of a salmon expiring upon a pile of oysters, had plugs which supplied the electric percolator and the electric toaster. In fact, there was but one thing wrong with the Babbitt house. It was not a home. 2. Often of a morning Babbitt came bouncing and jesting into breakfast, but things were mysteriously awry today. As he pontifically treaded the upper hall, he looked into Verona's bedroom and protested, "What's the use of giving a family a high-class house when they don't appreciate it, tend to do business, and get down to brass tacks?" He marched upon them. Verona, a dumpy, brown-haired girl of 22, just out of Bryn Mawr, given to solicitudes about duty and sex and God and the unconquerable bagginess of the gray sports suit she was now wearing. Ted, Theodore Roosevelt Babbitt, a decorative boy of 17. Tinka, Catherine, still a baby at 10, with radiant red hair and a thin skin which hinted of too much candy and too many ice cream sodas. Babbitt did not show his vague irritation as he tramped in. He really disliked being a family tyrant, and his nagging was as meaningless as it was frequent. He shouted at Tinka, "Well, Kitty Doodle!" It was the only pet name in his vocabulary, except for the dear and hun with which he recognized his wife, and he flung it at Tinka every morning. He gulped a cup of coffee in the hope of pacifying his stomach and his soul. His stomach ceased to feel as though it did not belong to him, but Verona began to be conscientious and annoying, and abruptly there returned to Babbitt the doubts regarding life and families and business which had clawed at him when his dream life and the slim fairy girl had fled. Verona had for 6 months been filing clerk at the Gruensberg Leather Company offices, with a prospect of becoming secretary to Mr. Gruensberg, and thus, as Babbitt defined it, getting some good out of your expensive college education till you're ready to marry and settle down. But now, said Verona, "Father, I was talking to a classmate of mine that's working for the Associated Charities. Oh, Dad, there's the sweet little babies that come to the milk station there, and feel as though I ought to be doing something worthwhile like that." "What do you mean, worthwhile? If you get to be Gutenberg's secretary, and maybe you would if you kept up your shorthand and didn't go sneaking off to concert and talk fest every evening, I guess you'll find 35 or 40 bones a week worthwhile." "I know, but I want to contribute. I wish I were working in a settlement house. I wonder if I could get one of the department stores to let me put in a welfare department and a nice restroom and chintzes and wicker chairs and so on and so forth. Or I could—"
"Now, you look here. The first thing you got to understand is that all this uplift and flip-flop and settlement work and recreation is nothing in God's world but the entering wedge for socialism. Sooner a man learns he isn't going to be coddled, and he needn't expect a lot of free grub and all these free classes and flip-flop and doodads for the kids unless he earns 'em, why, the sooner he'll get up on the job and produce. That's what the country needs, and not all this fancy stuff that just enfeebles the willpower of the working man and gives his kids a lot of notions above their class. And you, if you'd tend to business instead of fooling and fussing all the time. When I was a young man I made up my mind what I wanted to do, and stuck to it through thick and thin, and that's why I'm where I am today. Myra, what do you let this girl chop the toast up into these dinky little chunks for? Can't get your fist onto 'em. Half cold anyway."
Ted Babbitt, junior in the great Eastlake High School, had been making hiccup-like sounds of interruption. He blurted now, "Say, Rone, you going to—" Verona whirled. "Ted, will you kindly not interrupt us when we're talking about serious matters?"
"Ah, punk," said Tech judiciously. "Ever since somebody slipped up and let you out of college, ammonia, you've been pulling these nut conversations about what-nots and so on and so forth.
Are you going to— I want to use the car tonight."
Babbitt snorted. "Oh, you do? May want it myself."
Verona protested. "Oh, will you do, Mr. Smarty? I'm going to take it myself." Tinka wailed, "Oh, Papa, you said maybe you'd drive us down to Rosedale."
Mrs. Babbitt, "Careful, Tinka, your sleeve is in the butter."
They glared, and Verona hurled, "Ted, you're a perfect pig about the car." "Course you're not. Not at all." Ted could be maddeningly bland. "You just want to grab it off right after dinner, and leave it in front of some skirt's house all evening while you sit and gas about literature and the highbrows you're going to marry, if they only propose."
"Well, Dad oughtn't to ever let you have it."
"You and those beastly Jones boys drive like maniacs. The idea of your taking that turn on the Chippewa place at 40 miles an hour! Where do you get all that stuff? You're so darn scared of the car that you drive uphill with the emergency brake on." "I do not. And you, always talking about how much you know about the motors, and Eunice Littlefield told me you said the battery fed the generator." Why, my good woman, you don't know a generator from a differential." Not unreasonably was Ted lofty with her. He was a natural mechanic, a maker and tinkerer of machines. He lisped in blueprints, for the blueprints came.
"That'll do now,"
Babbitt flung in mechanically, as he lighted the gloriously satisfying first cigar of the day and tasted the exhilarating drug of the Advocate-Times headlines. Ted negotiated. "Gee, honest, Rone, I don't want to take that old boat, but I promised a couple of girls here in my class I'd drive 'em down to the rehearsal of the school chorus, and gee, I don't want to, but a gentleman's got to keep his social engagements." "Well, upon my word, you and your social engagements!"